this new book is a little bit different. You have some Christian aspects to the anti-Mary, obviously that book, but how feminism and Christianity trying to push those together. The church has its own way that we describe that. So for those who don't know how you kind of talk about feminism, do you want to give us a blanket, just like definition, just a working definition, so that we can work from there?
Yeah, and then talk about a good idea, because there might be people that construe what you're saying. Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because I started out with understanding feminism, taking kind of a base definition, which is really the aspect of female autonomy. From the very earliest stages of feminism, there was the idea that women really should focus on themselves and protect themselves against their fertility. I mean, all of this developed over centuries, of course, but that's where really the starting point. But there's all these other pieces to it, and that's really what led me to the backbone of this book, Something Wicked, because I realized when you put all these pieces together of feminism, what was created was actually this idea of a shadow church. So feminism is basically like the world's biggest megachurch, because it has an idol, which is female autonomy. It has a set of commandments, like instead of 10, there are just 3, which is be promiscuous, engage in the occult, and have contempt for men. It's got a sacrament, which is, of course, abortion. It's got a right, which is work, because you can't be autonomous if you don't have a job. And it also has theological virtues. So we talk about faith, hope, and love in the Christian faith. And feminism is really focused on rage, contempt, and envy.
All right, welcome to another episode of The Catholic Couple, having fun with faith, family, and friends. I'm your co-host, Bobby Fredrickson. With me, as always, my beautiful wife,
Katie Fredrickson.
I'm the convert Catholic, and she's
the cradle Catholic.
Here we are on a special episode where we have both of us actually on an episode here. So we were able to get together on an interview together. We have a very special guest with us. We have Dr. Carrie Gress. She is a PhD and a scholar at the Institute of Human Ecology at Catholic University of America. She's the founder and editor of the online women's magazine, theologyofthehome.com, author of 10 books, probably more now, including 11, yes, including Theology of the Home series, the Anti-Mary Exposed, End of Woman, and her new book that's coming out, Something Wicked, Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity. Wow. So we have a lot to unpack. So thank you so much for taking the time. And we got 5 children and taking the time here on a school night to talk about something important.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It's fun to be here.
So right off the bat, this newest book, did you try the Something Wicked to kind of tie that into the movie Wicked? And is there any connection there? Because when I looked at the logo, it kind of reminded me, I thought right away of Wicked.
Right. You know, what's really funny is I had been thinking about a title for this book, and I was like, I want something that people are already familiar with so that it sticks in their memory. And one day I was walking around my house, and that the word Something Wicked This Way Comes just came to me, and I was like, wait, what about Something Wicked? And then, of course, I realized that there's a whole, that, the movie is coming, or was out, and the next one's coming out. Yeah. And then actually in the book, there's a whole connection with Matilda Gage, who is one of these feminists that nobody knows of, but she was the mother-in-law of L. Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz. Wow. And all of that, there's all this connection between The Wizard of Oz, and of course it's The Wizard of Oz, which is what Wicked is based on. So anyway, it's really, there's so many tentacles to this book, really historical tentacles that have been very fun. So yeah, it was just a great thing to see all these pieces come together and connect on all these things that people are already familiar with, but kind of help us understand the storyline and kind of how things have unfolded over the years, centuries, really.
Yeah.
Well, this new book is a little bit different. You have some Christian aspects to the anti-Mary, obviously that book, but how feminism and Christianity trying to push those together. The church has its own way that we describe that. So for those who don't know how you kind of talk about feminism, do you want to give us a blanket, just like definition, just a working definition, so that we can work from there?
Yeah, and then talk about a good idea, because there might be people that construe what you're saying. Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because I started out with understanding feminism, taking kind of a base definition, which is really the aspect of female autonomy. From the very earliest stages of feminism, there was the idea that women um, really should focus on themselves and protect themselves against their fertility. I mean, all of this developed over centuries, of course, but that's where really the starting point. But there's all these other pieces to it, and that's really what led me to the backbone of this book, Something Wicked, because I realized when you put all these pieces together of feminism, what was created was actually this idea of a shadow church. So feminism is basically like the world's biggest megachurch because it has an idol, which is female autonomy. It has a set of commandments like instead of 10, there are just 3, which is be promiscuous, engage in the occult, and have contempt for men. It's got a sacrament, which is, of course, abortion. It's got a right, which is work, because you can't be autonomous if you don't have a job. And it also has theological virtues. So we talk about faith, hope, and love in the Christian faith. And feminism is really focused on rage, contempt, and envy. So it was really interesting when I actually put all of these pieces together, because I was speaking at Seek last year, and I thought, how do I make this really simple for college students to just be able to remember this easily? And the more that I thought about the idea, I just thought, this is really a great way to understand why feminism is so different from Christianity, because it set itself up in opposition to Christianity instead of being in a way, or existing in a way that it can work naturally with Christianity.
So are you defining more of like looking at the modern feminism, or has a feminism always had that undertone?
It's always had it. Actually, it started back in the first grandmother of feminism is 1792. Mary Wollstonecraft wrote a document called The Vindication of the Rights of Woman. And she was the one that really carved out the idea where we needed to get rid of hierarchy, and we needed to really start trying to make women more like men, that men and women can, if they're virtuous enough, this was kind of her argument, that they could sort of be interchangeable. But the other piece that I think has not been discussed about Wollstonecraft, for those who talk about Wollstonecraft, is that she was actually, she was first an Anglican, then she became a dissenting Christian against Anglicanism, and then eventually she became a Unitarian. And Unitarians don't actually believe in the divinity of Christ. They just think he was a nice example, but he's not divine. Coming from that, she also believed that any kind of masculine role model or mediator, someone like a priest or a pastor, only gets in the way of a woman's potential and her relationship with God, that women need to have this direct contact with him, and any man, including Jesus, just gets in the way. So anyway, you can see with that kind of a foundation, that there were problems from the beginning, and then you just start rolling through history, which is what I do. I did that in my last book on a more secular level, and then Something Wicked really goes through and pinpoints just the theological problems and a lot of the misinformation about the first wave. I think people have had, myself included, for a long time. I just always thought, okay, the first wave was good, and everything went south in the 60s.
Yeah, that's me too. That it got actually hijacked by men, and that's where it took that toll of that. That's how I always believed it. That it just got that.
That's what we're told.
Oh yeah, girl. Oh yeah, you know what? You should also have multiple partners, girl. Like, you know what I mean? Like believing a lie. Of a hijack again. It just became that men still taking over that idea. But yeah, I didn't know that it had those nefarious roots.
Actually, the amazing thing is that it was Mary Wollstonecraft's son-in-law, who was Percy Bysshe Shelley, who's this romantic poet. He lived in around 1810. He wrote this poem about a woman named Cythna. And Cythna was this kind of idealized feminist. They didn't use that term then, of course, but what Shelley did was he knew of Mary Wollstonecraft's work and the idea of contempt for men. He also knew of his father-in-law's work, William Godwin, who's very little known, but was hugely influential upon like Karl Marx and other liberal thinkers. And Godwin didn't believe in marriage. He thought monogamy was terrible and then kind of enslavement for women. So Percy Shelley takes that idea. He takes Mary Wollstonecraft's idea, and then he adds the occult to it. because he was personally fascinated by the occult. He didn't believe in God. He got thrown out of Oxford for his atheistic beliefs, and even spent the night in a coffin to conjure up the devil. Like he was just, and he was a horrible man. He was also just an awful husband and father. And his first wife committed suicide because of his affairs, and, just on and on. But anyway, so he creates this woman, Sithna, and she has contempt for men. She is promiscuous and she believes in the occult. So all that is in 1810. And if you look at women today, kind of what you just described, most women, especially in colleges, that's what they're involved in. They have contempt for men, they're promiscuous, and they are involved in the occult. The tarot cards or horoscopes, all those kinds of things. So it's really interesting to see just how early those ideas came about. And then they just kind of cycle through history throughout the decades until we get to this point where now it's just kind of the way women behave. So
yeah, I love the way that you described it in your interview with Matt Fradd, where you basically called it like an unholy trinity of the reverse, because the smash the patriarchy is going against God the Father, and the occult is an affront to the divinity of Jesus, and do whatever you want, free love with your body is obviously blasphemy to the Holy Spirit. Your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. So I thought that was interesting. That's the big difference with this book, is trying to point those things out, that there's all these nefarious underpinnings. If it's not, the occult, it's the communism aspect, where there's all these, and we know what that is. The first thing in every communist country does is get rid of God. That's the first move, whether that's the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution.
And then government becomes your dad, right? Government becomes
get
your
rid of the family, right?
Just to disassemble that.
Yeah. So what I always, thought was interesting, and one of the better arguments is that, these, especially the first wave, is that they say, don't be a slave to your husband and your family, but be a slave to a bank or a corporation.
Right.
That kind of slavery is okay, because that's eventually you're going to be a slave to somebody. I'd rather be a slave to Jesus Christ, is what it tells us in scripture. But that was a bad thing, to be a slave to your children. It's like so frowned upon. Do you think a lot of that comes from like these people who have had horrible personal lives? That's like, the more you study like Marx, or you study any of these people who have had these horrible ideas, it's like they weren't good people. They're like justify within themselves their own bad behavior or how they were treated by their own family, and it's just like perpetual, like their own personal experience, and it's just a shame that if they would have been loved in a different way, that they never would have had these poisonous lies spread out through the world.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to know the nefarious parts of it, but is there some tenets to being a successful, strong woman that can be independent in the face of a difficult situation, like having to, I was raised by a single mother, because of a bad situation with my father, who couldn't be in our lives anymore, because it would be actually detrimental to our situation. So I also look at that aspect of being able to raise a daughter who is strong and can be independent and is a hard worker. But I think that it's when we get into the lies of like what you were saying about this, that we have to be like men or be men in order to prosper, or if that we like these tear down men in order to build us up, or that we have to have this fear almost, and I guess fear of our own reproductive systems, fear, and also loathing, right, for those things. I think those are those aspects of feminism that I but as a successful woman, do you hold on to some tenets though of that, strong, independent, educated, right? Are there some tenets you can hold on to?
Yeah, you guys just threw a bunch of, like, my head is whirling through centuries and different decades right now, based on all the things that you said and have thrown out. So I'm going to try and tackle first things first. Absolutely. The very first century of feminist women, all of them were very broken women. Mary Wollstonecraft had this awful father, abusive, drunk, hung the family dog in front of everyone, like just an awful, awful man. And what's interesting is when you start looking at all of these major figures, there's a real pattern that emerges, and it's kind of the same dynamic. And the first wave is really it starts with Mary Wollstonecraft. It ends with the French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir. And I actually think that these women are incredibly similar. for many reasons that I go into in the book. But both of them had fathers who were started off with a certain amount of wealth, and then they just squandered it for various reasons. And then their mothers were either would overcompensate or undercompensate and become, they were reacting to this awful fatherhood, or husbands rather. So the daughters then end up where they can't really integrate. They're broken and they can't really integrate work and love together. And so, and they're broken enough that they want to protect themselves from being vulnerable ever again. And I think that is what we've come up with. The second wave in particular really grabbed onto that. Was we're not really dealing with female human nature. What we're trying to do is protect ourselves against the vulnerabilities that are connected with our female human nature. So that I think is an important distinction to just recognize, that feminism is a way to exist in the world without God. Because if you don't have, if you're the only one protecting yourself, then you have to do these things to make sure you're not vulnerable. And that's, of course, the beauty of the Christian life. The Catholic life is really just recognizing that God is our true father, and it's in him that we have our identity. We have our, all of our relationships, and everything that happens to us is somehow connected to that. So anyway, I think that's just an important piece of really understanding the ideology of feminism, and why it's the case that we, I've heard women say, I thought my womb was a curse, and really hate their femininity and really hate their embodiedness. That's the amazing thing, is how much we've tried to get rid of, even to the point of chopping off breasts and making ourselves into something more like men. And that biological is just following what feminism has promoted from really the very beginning. But as far as, being an independent woman who's educated, I get a lot of pushback, people saying, well, you wouldn't be those things if it weren't for feminism. And I think, there are a lot of things that have happened in my life. And I think actually all women in the West, we're all suffering from feminism in ways that we can't identify because it's never been pointed out. It's just kind of the air that we breathe. So there are a lot of things that we have to not, start to understand the way that we've been really indoctrinated. And, this is why we think our fertility is a burden instead of a gift. But I don't think that it came from feminism, the possibility for education. I mean, certainly there were ways in which it pushed forward. But if you look actually at the trajectory of feminism, and even, a lot of it came more from the wealth that was created in the Industrial Revolution, which gets into a whole other discussion, because I think feminism, I think the Industrial Revolution pushed
advances and technology. That's a big part of it.
It's a huge part of it. And so finally, families have the wealth to be able to educate their children. They can send them out of the home. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but there's, that's a whole piece of it that we're not paying attention to. And, even something like a dishwasher, washing machines, these transform culture significantly as well. So, and I think, there's a big difference between being a strong woman in your femininity versus being a strong woman who's aping the masculine.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important distinction that we make, because a lot of women, especially women who ask me, why can't I find a husband, or, all those challenges that women have with the opposite sex. So much of it comes from the fact that we've been told, especially in, law school and those higher education, C-suite jobs, that we have to mimic men. But what never happens in that situation is the full integration of our femininity. That has to come about through a woman maturing. And I think that's really where the strength and the capacity to know yourself, to know yourself as a woman, really has to be done. And that's something we don't really talk about. We just talk about, get the job or the income, but we don't talk about, how do I become the woman that God made me to be? And then allow that to manifest itself in my relationships, whether it's at home or in the workplace, with children, with my spouse, all of those kinds of things. So I think feminism has done us a disservice, because it's made us believe that our empowerment, it was a kind of aping of the masculine, instead of a real integration of the feminine.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference, obviously, between feminism and femininity, which is a characteristic of being a true woman.
Right.
So with that, we always hear, especially I do another podcast with a guy. We do a lot of talking about toxic masculinity.
Mhm.
What is some traits in a woman where it goes too far, as far
Yeah.
as even taking the feminine too far?
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about Jordan Peterson a little bit. We know like that devouring mother type, that trying to
Right.
infantilize
Right.
all of our kids and things like that. What are some things in your
Mhm.
opinions on that, as far as this overcompensation that we're seeing what the man did for so long, this manosphere or whatever, this Andrew Tates of the world, where
Mm.
Right.
people have gone so far, they're pushing this way. What are you seeing out there where women are they're taking too far the other way?
Mhm. Well, I mean, it's funny because it's sort of the female mirror of Andrew Tate. It's the Andrew Andrew Tates and the radical feminists are basically just opposite sides of the same coin, where they're trying to control and manipulate the opposite sex in a way that's beneficial for them. It's about control and power, I think, and disdain and contempt. I think that's what's going on. But women have, a unique set of their own vices, which points to the fact that we have different virtues as well, which is really interesting. But women have there's actually a great book I would recommend called Warriors versus Worriers. And women, because of the fact that we are biologically weaker, because we're so vulnerable when we have children and we're raising them, women are constantly. In fact, I think we talk about men's. All of us have pride as our primary sin, I think, but men tend more towards lust. Women tend towards much more towards envy. And this is where we get the idea. Women are constantly comparing themselves to others. There's this desire to sort of always be first, that kind of sharp elbows competition that goes on. There's the mean girls phenomenon. All of these are very subtle and very long-term and and can be very manipulative. So I think those are very different than the ways in which we see men be vicious. Women have their own set, and it's based on the fact that we have a different human nature, and that's what's really creating the problems. And so what we've done is really exacerbated those by trying to portray them as virtues. Get ahead and or we see this all the time, I think, in the popular culture, just the mean girls attitude, and the over sexualization too. That, of course, is a whole other realm that's really a way to manipulate men and obviously denigrate women. So yeah, I think there's a whole panoply of things that are very different than men's issues, which should give us both pause, because we need to recognize the viciousness of women, but we also can have great hope that women have their own set of great virtues that the culture needs, and they need to be used in conjunction with men, because we're made for complementarity, and really the balance that comes when the two work together is when we're at our best, when we're striving for goals in the family and in culture and beyond.
So as parents, we have a young daughter. She's in middle school and going to be embarking into high school. We're in that era.
Mhm.
What are some things as parents to help to foster true femininity and anti-feminist ideologies that are really shoved on girls? I mean, what's really trendy right now, right? Every girl wants to go to Sephora and Ulta because they think, the makeup
Right.
and you know what I mean? Like these things of what they think they have to be doing right now. And there's just so much pressure, I feel like, on them more to
Yeah.
be the best, to be perfect, to look
Definitely
perfect.
around beauty for sure.
Yeah.
Appearances is huge.
Well, and then the comparison comes in and you
Mhm.
have, I feel it. You almost need to do all those things, but then also be just as good as a man. So
Right. Yeah.
you have to be it all. You have to
Yeah.
be
Right.
beautiful, feminine,
Yeah.
a girl boss, but also be as fast as you know what I mean? Like we're just as bad, just as good, if
Yeah.
not better than you. And that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
As a parent, how do we help them navigate that?
I think that's a great question. One of the best ways, I think, is to well, first of all, the most important thing is the fact, how you do it yourself. This is one of the hardest parts, is that so many of the issues that we see young girls having, they're picking up the patterns from their moms. Do you gossip about other women? How do you treat other women? How do you treat people that are not valuable to you? All of those things, I think, are really important roles in modeling how we want our daughters to behave. The biggest piece, though, beyond that, is really recognizing the importance of motherhood. And that's not just biological mother, it's also spiritual motherhood, it's mentoring. And it's something that I think as older women, no longer teens, as moms ourselves, we have to appreciate that and embody that, so that they know what to look for. Because this is one of the things that I've found, even doing research for different books. I was like, it's really hard to find like a good grandmotherly kind of woman in the culture today. And I looked hard and high and low for a book I wrote about 10 years ago. And I just kept running into just bizarre situations. One grandmother was like upset with her daughter because she was having her 5th baby. And she was like, you're going to die. And, she was just, her own fears about having a lot of children were really manifest and just creating so many problems. So I think the big piece is modeling that, but also helping our daughters know how important motherhood really is. That's not just some like getting a driver's license, like maybe you'll do it, maybe you won't, but that's who we are meant to be as women. This is why we can't define womanhood, because we don't want it to involve motherhood, but that's what we're meant to do. We're meant to give life. So it can be questions like, when there's struggles, you can ask them questions like, well, how did you treat so-and-so? Do you feel like you brought goodness or life? Anyway, you can find your own language, but the idea is that women are always meant to bring life into the world. This is our gift, whether we do it biologically or all these other spiritual or emotional ways.
So in this, when in friendships, right? Like, what are you bringing to in your friendships and relationships that you're in as a preteen and teenager, that's going to help, I love that. Did you bring life into that?
And that's the truest source of beauty as well. Like, that's the other piece. Those things have to be connected, is that understanding of when you are authentically good, people just want to be near you because of your goodness. That will come through your complexion. This is the Mother Teresa effect. Like, Mother Teresa was not a pretty woman. And yet people who met her said she was so beautiful because her goodness, her connection with God, her grace, all of that oozed out from her face and, all of that. So I think that's another piece, is how do we understand beauty in an ordered way?
Big time. Being other-centered.
And what is the message that women are hearing? It's all about, treat yourself, right? Like you should, you shouldn't run yourself ragged. We do have like moments where we do need to have self-care, and with some of those elements, we get this guilt, but the culture does take that too far, right? Into you putting yourself first and you putting your needs first over anything else, and, it's a constant battle for them,
Well, and this is the thing, is that that research is showing that women are losing the capacity to be empathetic towards their own children, because we've been so focused on ourselves. What do I need? And of course that's endless. Like, there's no end point of happiness in that. It's just going to you just need more of that, being filled by that narcissism. So I think that's a real key, is to help girls understand that their greatest joy is going to be when they're serving others and looking for how to serve them, not again in a devouring mother kind of way or a codependency, but in an ordered way where you use your gifts. And I think this is a really important point. Also, is that we've also been told that we can change the world. If we just work hard enough or strong enough, but really the best way to change the world is to love those that are closest to you.
Right.
And that starts in the womb. This is the woman that works for PETA that has aborted her own child. Like, how distorted is that? Where that which is close and we're meant to love, we're killing. And then those things that we never encounter and we will never meet, or even are not even humans, that we want to help, we can't help because we don't actually have a real relationship with them. You can sort of see the beauty of God's design, that we're meant to love that which is close to us. This is why the home is important, because that's the place in which not only do you get to love those closest to you, but you also get to give those whom you love a foretaste of heaven, in the home, between nourishing them, feeding them, giving them security, comfort, love, affection, all those things that children need, especially girls, to go out into the world. So all these things fit together together beautifully when we start just putting them in order again.
That's funny because it was a little controversial when JD Vance brought that up about the order of love. Like that's a controversial thing. Like, well, practically in everybody's life, you love those closest to you first. Obviously, it's like I discriminate against every other woman because of my wife. I mean, that's just part of it. But it's sad that we have to even say, but that's not saying that we don't have solidarity with the human race and do what we can do. But like you said, most people, they run away from those issues that are so close because it's hard to love your neighbor. It's hard to love your child well. It's hard to do that.
Yes.
It's really easy
on
Facebook to say, I'm so great, I wrote a check and I'm in PETA or I'm in this thing, but that doesn't take anything really.
Right. Because it doesn't demand anything of you. You know, you're usually drawing a paycheck from that, and then you get to go home at the end of the day. And you're not really challenged by it, you know, beyond whatever you're doing at your job. But the real demands of loving somebody and growing,
like you said, it's a demand.
It's got the word in it.
It's got it in there. That's it. It's demanding. Love is demanding, and it requires sacrifice,
and it hurts.
And cutting a check sometimes, I get it. That is, but there's nothing like even if you want to lead on like Pope Francis, what did he say? You want to love someone, go out and get to smell the sheep on you. That's true love. You want to work a soup kitchen, look the person in the eye and talk to them. It's real easy just to scoop soup into a bowl, but to have a conversation with somebody who's a little mentally ill or off or homeless or smells bad, try that. Like that's loving them, the person in front of you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really what the role of women who know about feminism really is, because, you know, people who need the most love are hardest to love. And this is what feminism has done, is it's made women very hard to love because we're bitter, we're angry. I mean, very intentionally, we've been manipulated into being angry because it's more politically expedient. Those are the people that are really hard to love. And I think that's, you know, a new frontier for Catholics in particular, because those are the people that need so much compassion, and yet they don't want it. They don't understand it. They put this shell around themselves so that they aren't vulnerable. And it's really women like that we need to have incredible compassion for. And that's, you know, one of the reasons why I write these books, is that I know I wasn't happy when I was a firm believer in the feminist world. And I know that other women aren't either. All the data is showing it. So we've definitely got our work cut out for us. And I think we have an incredible message that, you know, if we could just, when it's finally delivered properly, there's been so many years of really manipulation, or, you know, throwing out the Handmaid's Tale women in their bonnets and red robes as trying to represent what those of us who don't like feminism are standing for. You know, when you can kind of get past that and people see like, that's actually just, you know, a tool, a rhetorical tool. Then people really start realizing like there's more here that's really beautiful and compelling. And that's another reason why we need to role model it, because so few people have actually seen what authentic and ordered womanhood looks like.
Well, especially like with your book going forward, where you're bringing the church into this fact. And what we see a lot is over and over again, no matter who's the Pope, it's what about women deacons? We need to have ordination for women. And that's the next thing. It's like, well, what do you mean women can't be priests? Why not? And that's the next, obviously, conclusion. If everything else, you get everything that a man is doing. So that would be the progression. And I'm sure you talk a little bit about that in that book, but you know, time and time again, they say, well, obviously it was Jesus set it up this way. The priests are in persona Christi. They are standing in as Christ. So that's just not a non-starter. But the whole deacon thing, just it won't stop, because I don't know why women feel that makes them feel like less than, but like Mary's the perfect, she's the most powerful woman in the Bible. Like one of the powerful besides Jesus. It's like so what,
well, but this is the mindset. I mean, think back. What have we said good about motherhood in the last 50 years? You can't think of anything. This is the reason why women have been so deeply indoctrinated into believing that they will be happy if the more their lives become like men's lives, and bad men's lives, promiscuous men who don't follow their vocations, men who just live by whatever whim, that they have plenty of money. So it's all of these pieces that have been sold to us as this is really where our happiness is going to be. And so that's what we have to undo. But you know, along with that is just like, we've got to tear all of these things down. And because of the patriarchy, I mean, that's the core piece, is women like egalitarianism, men function and operate and organize things through hierarchy. Women don't have a problem when it's either the military or corporate America being in a hierarchy. But otherwise, they want everything to sort of be a level playing field, especially the church, as I was talking about earlier. But this is obviously doesn't get at what are the gifts that we're getting from men through hierarchy, through patriarchy, through the gifts that men have. And so women have just obviously not only said we don't need men, but also told men that their gifts, are inapplicable to the world. That great Gloria Steinem line, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, because we've so denigrated the gifts that men have, except in places where, it's just some like corporate America where there really is a hierarchy. So that's another problem is we just have we've tried to make women more like bad men and then make men more like bad women.
Well, that's what, yeah, I was going to say. I feel that has there really been a good man role model in our culture in the last 50 years? So you spoke about, has there really been what's so great about motherhood? Has that been shown? Has really, I feel like, I don't know what came first, if there was a lack of initiative in men, right? But now, like, you look at the rise of the Al Bundys and the Homer Simpsons in our culture, and how dad was portrayed in families, bumbling idiot, and who has all the knowledge, the woman, right? Like that.
But I
there
think just
is
motherhood in general, though, was like, hey, if you see someone who has 5 kids, you're like, oh, you're crazy. How you're like, what's the matter with you? Like you're like an alien. Like, you're a weird person if you got more than 2 kids. It's like I can't. How do you like? You're like somebody else. It's like that kind of shifted big time. Like everybody I know has a lot of kids. First thing they say is like, I can't believe, like it's never good. Like, oh, how great you got so many kids. Never have I heard that ever. It's always,
that's not the comment. They're having another one.
Yeah, it's always denigrated, and that, I think that's part of the problem. Is like we should be celebrating. We have I know people, Elon Musk is like the only one talking about it. We have a crisis of replacing human beings in the world.
Right.
Like it is going to be a big problem because of this lie, and it's having practical implications not only with our faith and people's psyches and anxiety and all these things, but literally dying off. Like China's in bad shape, and like South Korea, these countries where they literally are just opposed to motherhood in general. It's like there's going to be ramifications of what that's going to look like. What does that look like in our faith? Like as we're starting to wrap up here, about how you mentioned a couple different times how they have like their own religion. It's almost like they created a false religion, but now they're trying to take that false religion and blend it with our Catholic faith and try to bring those tenets in there, just like communism tries to sneak in, or all these different isms try to come into the church and to get within the church, try to break it up within. So what are those things that you talk about in your book that we can look forward to when this comes out? Because I can't wait to read it. But this is something that's going on big time. We see it every day in the news.
Well, I mean, I don't think I think it's already in the church. I mean, this is one of the things I talked about. One place you can look is at the Catholic thing. I wrote an article about basically how the women in the pews have become like mini Betty Friedan's, because we can't, when was the last time you heard a homily on contraception or abortion? And much of that is because of the pressure that women place on priests and bishops. If it is raised, nobody, women don't want to give up their contraception in the church, and they've never heard the, good news about not contracepting. We're in the faith, we're aborting and contracepting almost at the same rates as the regular culture. So this has created a lot of problems because of the pressure that women exert, especially through cancel culture. And, all it takes is to sort of get one woman angry and she'll contact all of her friends. And the next thing you know, you've got a whole firestorm on Facebook about what Father so-and-so said at Mass. And no priest wants that. No school principal wants that. People don't want to deal with that. And feminism has been like kryptonite on men. I mean, men don't want to talk about it either. So it's really incredibly sad how much it's affected the faith and our own birth rates and our own parishes. And I think that's something that we have to start really taking back, because that's, so many of our problems are created there. And a lot of it's going to have to just come from women themselves, where we start standing up and being more of a voice for the things that we know that the church teaches, and the way that we can put them forward in the world, and certainly in our church. So we've got to work it out for us. That's not to say that men don't have a role, but it's just such an unenviable position to be in.
You
And I
can't,
don't
you uterus. You can't even talk about women.
Yeah, yeah.
You're just shut down right away.
Right.
Well, are you seeing the trends with this newer generation? Because I think a lot of why men aren't in the pews, like we're starting to see a rise where men are coming back because especially to more traditional churches. But for so long that the boomers, this is the way that they you go to most parishes, it's mostly dominated by women.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. It's very rare to have men who are actively involved, other than like, setting up for the picnic or, being an usher and moving some chairs around. It's very rare. But I wonder how much is that is like, okay, well, I don't want to, it's like guys also want to be part of a church where they can be masculine, where, the Jesus were portrayed as, he's got the lamb, the lamb, and he's so nice, and he's like hippie Jesus. Versus the Jesus who's a warrior and who, flipping tables, but also could be a protector and also be a nurturer. It's like we have to, we're not in competition. Like you said, we're complementary, and we have to find a way to bring this together, because both sides are scared of each other. It's like the women are afraid of guys being too creepy. And the guys are like, well, if I even ask a girl out, I'm a creep, because, next thing you know, me too. And because I wanted to ask a girl out on a date, and I was a little over, didn't know how to do it, because no one has.
I've never done it before. Right. Yeah.
Like no one's done it, especially COVID and everything's out. Like people are, I know somebody who just like went out, like to coffee with a girl, and he like didn't like, he needs more exposure to how to do it. Like but it's a balance. But some people, like, it's like a catch-22 right now, and both sides need to lay down their guns, but try to come to a way to how to do that. Like, who's gonna lead the way to show this next generation, like, get out and do it. I've heard Professor Scott Galloway talk about it. He was like encouraging, like, drinking's down so much, because like at least if you went to a bar and had a drink, like you would actually talk to another person of the other side. That's not even going on anymore. It's like, it's so taboo. And it's like, everyone I talk to, how do I meet a good girl? And the girl's like, how do I meet a guy? And like, they literally don't know how to do this. And this is where we're at, especially within the church. Like, well, have you started in the church? Like, let's start there. But they're just they're not in your parish, So what are some trends you're seeing with this next generation? Are things looking up? Are we looking down? Are you hopeful?
What's really interesting is I think that the women that are hanging on to feminism are the Gen X and the Boomer women. Those are the ones that are, in large part, are kind of intransigent on it, unless they're single women that never had children, and then they are waking up because they realize they bought in too much to it, and they're like, what do I do? This was not the life I wanted when I was an older woman. So those are the tragic stories. But younger women, although they've taken on a lot of feminist behavior, they don't like the name of it. They're happy to get rid of it. And that, I think, is really promising to see. And of course, we're all seeing that men are voting differently. The big problem is certainly the birth dearth, and then the way women vote. And that's got to be something that we really start looking at, and why we need to be motivated about it, because we're never going to get back to a pro-life culture until we start really shifting them on the cultural level, which is going to affect the vote. So I think that's really where we need to start putting our efforts, and not so much on like political issues, but really on like magazines, TV shows, all of that is really important. I think we look down upon those things as kind of fluff as Catholics. But this is one of the reasons why I wrote the Theology of Home books, why I've got a blog, because that's the way women like to absorb content. And this is how the culture was destroyed, through Vogue, Cosmo, all of these women who they had a lot of money at their disposal. They had these gorgeous magazines, and they had, no scruples about shoving lies upon women, which, we know from Sue Ellen Browder's book she wrote for Cosmopolitan magazine, and just, said she could make up all these stories about the Cosmo woman, and she could say anything she wanted about the Cosmo woman, except that she was a mother or a virgin. And of course, who's the Virgin Mother? Our Lady.
Wow.
So those are the things that have been really attacked, and we need to just get back to the real value and beauty of those things, and just, not only what they do for the woman, but just the ripple effect on the society. This is why people are so lonely, because women were the ones that would look after people, that would plan the events, that would have people over, that would, were naturals at hospitality.
We're too busy now to do that, because it's not as fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm too busy to plan what I probably would love to have at my home because I'm working all the time. We're
Yeah.
busy working.
Exactly.
We're
No, and that's the crux of it, is that we women, we're kind of foolish because we've been sold on this idea that we can have a full-time job and we could raise our kids simultaneously. And that's the problem. We're exhausted, we're stressed out,
Okay.
and our kids are not getting what they need from and deserve really from their moms. So yeah, I think it's running its course. I think women are waking up to it, younger women in particular. And it's going to help a lot too that I think men, in fact, I did a Turning Point event back in the spring, and it was pretty amazing because there were all these young men there that they were like, I thought I'd be the only guy here. And there were a lot of them. It was a smallish group, but it was just great to talk to them, and their openness to, how do we help women um, be better so that we can not only that we can find wives, but that we can really make this generational shift that feels so important on so many different levels. Even just on the grand scale of civilization, we're not reproducing ourselves. And this is why we need the mass immigration to, fund these huge welfare states. So yeah, these are big issues that I think people are really beginning to start thinking about more and are open to changing. So I'm hopeful.
Awesome.
And nobody was talking about this 10 years ago. When my
Yeah.
first book on feminism came out 10 years ago, nobody was talking about it. It was like brand new content. So it's really heartening to see how much it's changed in the culture over the last few years.
Well, thank you for starting the conversation and keeping it going, and your passion to keep 11 books in. And it's such an important topic, as motherhood is the most important thing. Without it, we are gone as a species, and especially within our faith, that it's definitely important to have that, good mothers and good fathers working together in harmony, not against each other.
Right.
So thank you so much for taking the time. I know you are very busy. What's the best place where people can find your work if they want to, this book? When does this book actually come out? Something with
It comes out January 20th. So that book, Something Wicked, can be found at sophiainstitute.com, or my own website, theologyofhome.com. If people want signed copies, I sell them there. So and I have a website, carriegress.com, that has all my books and most recent art, or actually the whole archive of articles from years past. So
beautiful.
that's
We'll put all that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So if you want the link, it'll be here below. So appreciate you taking the time. If you thought that this conversation was good, you want to add, we want to know what you think. What lies have feminism told to you or your teachers? What kind of stuff have you been dealing with this? We want to hear from you in the comments. If you like this, please subscribe. Our new episodes come out every week with other great guests. So we want to thank you so much, Dr. Carrie Gress, for coming on the show.
my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, have a